The Learning Spaces Collaboratory YouTube series is an opportunity to present stories from the LSC community about planning that focuses on the future of 21st century learning spaces for 21st century learners.
So when I interviewed for a faculty position in the chemistry department in February of 1980, I was impressed with the creativity of the chemistry faculty and how they had run residential rain gutters crisscrossing the laboratory spaces to collect the water that was leaking in through the roof and drain it off into sinks so they could continue to use the spaces. And a few years went by, and I eventually got tenure, and I became the department chair, and there was an opportunity to write a grant proposal to renovate some research and research training spaces, i.e. upper-level laboratory spaces, that at Grinnell were in a building that was built in the early 50s that looked basically like this. So they had been designed as introductory chemistry labs and converted to student faculty research labs, but they were tired. So there was an opportunity to write a grant proposal, and we got the proposal. We got the grant to renovate some spaces, and as soon as we got into it, we realized that we were in a bit over our heads and we needed some help. We needed technical help on how to design modern laboratories, but importantly, we needed not just to think through how to replace that hood with a modern fume hood, but to think through what we wanted the spaces to do in terms of serving our students and faculty educationally. And besides, this was about probably less than 10% of the building that we were renovating. The rest of it was in similar condition, and we needed to develop a long-term plan for the rest of our science facilities. So at that point, we identified and found Rick Heinz with Research Facilities Design, and he joined our team.
Right, so that was, I believe, in 1989. So when Jim's team was awarded the NSF Academic Research Infrastructure Grant, it was to renovate existing space for chemistry student research. The project also included renovating their existing chemistry stockroom to correct some problems with ventilation, to create a separate office for the lab manager and so on. But I think one of the most important things that came out of that was it really got the ball rolling as the science division got excited about the possibilities offered by improved facilities. They could see what could be done with an older building, and they were determined to start thinking about long-term planning for the sciences.
So we got that project completed and rolled into starting to think about what we needed to do in the longer term. And we started with a wing of a building that was built in 1951 and another wing of the building built at the same time that was plywood and a slab-on-grade structure that was supposed to be temporary. And then an addition to the building that was added on in 1964, and those housed biology, chemistry, physics, and a small science library. And then in the yellow, you can see there's a wing, L-shaped wing on the right-hand side that was added on into 1987 that has housed computer science, mathematics, and psychology. That brought all of our sciences together. So that was our starting condition. We really then moved to try to figure out what this educational vision was that we had and to develop a plan to really support the idea of making our courses more like doing science, at trying to build our capacity to support undergraduate research, and really importantly to develop spaces that would support community among the faculty and the students and a sense of belonging on the part of the students. Our eyes were bigger than our budget, and even when trying to be austere, we realized that we needed to break the project into two phases, one that we would implement as one and one that we would implement later.
Right, so in order to help facilitate that process, I got re-engaged in like 1993 to work with the science community to create a master plan program for the sciences to address some of the spaces like you see on the screen, sort of the before picture. At that point, the 1980s wing was still almost brand new and housed computer science, math, and psychology. Those departments felt their needs were being met and really chose not to be involved. They thought they were all set. So programming progressed for biology, chemistry, and physics, through a series of iterative multi-day workshops on campus that we usually started with the planning committee meeting, followed by departmental breakout sessions, and ending with an exit session with the committee again to discuss initial findings, issues that required attention at a higher level, and discuss next steps in the process. So these workshops were about 4 to 5 weeks apart, included sessions with other campus stakeholders, including students, faculty from other disciplines, facilities and physical plant personnel, et cetera. And as the master plan program was being completed, the college recognized it really wasn't practical to accomplish the entire project in one phase. So the group worked to analyze the space list and prioritize the program into what they considered to be most important to accomplish in phase 1.
So with that program in hand, we did a national search for an architect who then would take that as a problem statement and help design a facility. And we were very fortunate to attract Halliburton and Root to the project, and I believe James Baird, the principal in charge, is on the call today, and happy to have him be a part of this whole project. So they ultimately helped us put into space what our aspirations were, and remembering that our aspirations were substantially larger than what we were going to be able to do. And just a few things to show some of the things that we accomplished. On the next slide shows the picture that you just saw previously of an old classroom with tiered tablet armchairs, and then a new classroom that we spent lots of time arguing about before we came to the right concept as a tiered classroom where the students are sitting in 2 tables per tier and they can engage actively and not just sort of face the forward. We designed teaching labs that were more like research labs for 2 reasons. One is we wanted the research to more effectively to use the space in the summertime when we didn't have classes, but we also wanted our classes to be more like research experiences. We wanted spaces like the one above where students could then show off to the whole campus their posters of their accomplishments, of research-like accomplishments in classes or their research projects. We also, through that process, developed a kind of master plan for the second phase of the project, so we knew roughly where we're going to go with the project, and I think Rick's going to talk about that a bit.
Right, so the phase 1 project did include some new construction that wrapped around the west and south sides of the existing building, presenting a new face to the campus quad while creating a more welcoming entry. So the photo on the left was the prior entrance from the south that Jim talked about as like entering the black abyss. And I think Halliburton did a great job of maintaining some campus context with the brick and all, but presenting a much more friendly and welcoming face to the quad, and a lot more transparency, windows and natural light than the existing building had.
I'll just interrupt here and just say that I think one of the things that happened is we were anticipating adding on yet another wing to this building, and what Halliburton and Root brought us was the vision to really engulf and wrap around the whole thing and re-envision the entire complex.
And I think one of the smart things that Jim and his colleagues did was they maintained that temporary 50s wing even at the completion of phase 1, because they felt as long as they had that phase 2 would eventually happen. So in addition to presenting the new face to the quad, having more transparency, natural light, and space for faculty offices and so on, much of the existing building was renovated for improved teaching labs. So again, you see a before and after picture on an introductory chemistry lab, where the older labs had long peninsula benches which didn't really provide safe egress or easy circulation for the faculty to get up next to the students. There were sightline issues and all, so the renovated labs, even in existing space, plus with painting the exposed ceilings white, really opened the space up a bit more with improved sight lines, safe egress, and the ability to move through the building and work collaboratively. Similarly, the organic chemistry lab, similar sightline issues and circulation, egress, and ADA issues that were much improved in the new design. One of the things, we've done lots of labs like this since, but this was the first time where we really reimagined organic chemistry, where students assigned space was their half of an 8-foot fume hood. So that meant the center of the room could be different with shared access to balance those instrumentation, sinks, and so on, and write-up and small group discussion space. So the middle of the room didn't just have all the benches lined up facing the same direction.
And I think one of the things that we learned from this is just doing things like bringing color in makes a big difference. The students just are happier to be in nice-looking spaces than drab old spaces. So this worked so well, we made a convincing case that 5 years after the first phase was completed that we should begin planning the second phase in the hopes that we would construct it, which we did, and it ended up opening roughly 10 years after the first phase opened. And it became, so one of the things that we learned along the way is one of my colleagues, David Lopato, started assessing what students learn when they engage in research experiences and in research-like experiences. And what we found is what the students reported that they learned are the kind of higher-order cognitive skills that employers and we that promote liberal education really desire them to have. So they were observing as they were engaging these experiences, they were learning just the kinds of things that we wanted them to learn. So that also helped us give us some assessment data and the impetus to try to then press harder on the accelerator of converting our spaces to really facilitate learning science by doing science.
Right.
So our colleagues in computer science, math, and psychology noticed all of this and were participating in discussions about how to change the curriculum and recognized that the spaces that weren't that old that they had moved into about 10 years earlier, or 12 years earlier, I guess, at this point, really didn't support that kind of a vision. They wanted to be a part of this, and so we decided the right thing to do was to really bring the whole science division, including the beyond just biology, chemistry, and physics, into this project. So we then planned the second phase. So the first phase of the project, if you can remember what it looked like before, shows a wrap around the south and the west sides. And then, Rick, you want to talk about how that evolved from there?
Right. So on the right, you see the kind of L-shaped wing where it was the 80s wing for math, computer science, and psychology. So the original concept developed by the team was that the up to the north where the existing sort of temporary 50s wing had been there for 40 or 50 years would get most of the attention then in the phase 2 concept. What actually evolved then, due to the success of phase 1 and the desired inclusion of math, computer science, and psychology, was a new concept for phase 2. And you can see that the project expanded to the east and to the south to engage that 80s wing, so it became an integral part of an integrated STEM complex that I think everybody feels good about. So the mixing of disciplines, the multi and interdisciplinary character of the resulting spaces, the sprinkling of student study interaction spaces, both open and social and more private and contemplative throughout the building, was a big success. And I think a lot of that was due to the continuity and leadership that Jim provided in working with his colleagues in a leadership position as the faculty shepherd that led to an even more efficient and effective process for phase 2 planning and design, but with the same A&E team.
Yeah, we were very fortunate to be able to do these really projects roughly a decade apart with essentially the same architectural and engineering team who really learned a lot through the process. We learned a huge amount from them, and we worked very well together. I think some of the key things that we learned from the project is that the teaching and research spaces work well, and in particularly they work well because we view them similarly, not just that they're completely different things, but that what we want to accomplish and the kind of learning that needs to occur in them is in common, and we share them back and forth regularly. Our gut feeling was that creating some small, non-specialized spaces for students to kind of hang out and study has even been more important than we thought. Our students really, really like those, and in particular, they tend to like them as like spaces that aren't large with lots of people in them, but smaller spaces. And as I'm working on another academic building project right now, and we were meeting with our architecture team and talking about some of these things, one of them, after a conversation, said, "Oh, I get it. Grinnell likes nookie." So here's some examples of those kinds of spaces. And really what we've learned in the science building has substantially influenced the design of other buildings on our campus, including athletic facilities, a campus center, and in a humanities and social studies project that's underway right now.
Yeah. So all in all, for me, this has been a very satisfying experience over a long period of time, both professionally and personally. I learned that clients can be more than clients. They can become lifelong friends. It really reinforced my career focus on lab planning for undergraduate STEM facilities. And it's helped me understand the importance of, again, asking the right questions, making sure the right people are at the table at the right times, and the really dramatic impact that pedagogy can and should have on science facilities planning.
So, and I guess I would say that these projects have been the most challenging and most satisfying experiences in my professional life. In part, I can walk out of my office and just see the impact that the spaces are having on what our students and faculty members are doing and how they're involved with one another. A few years ago, we did some focus groups with second-year science students to ask them about their sense of belonging in science and how they were learning and how various support structures were working. And after that was over, the person who was from the Science Education Resource Center who did the focus groups, I called her and I said, "Ellen, how did it go?" And she said, "It went pretty well. I learned a lot." But she said, "I couldn't get many of my questions answered because the students wouldn't stop talking about the impact of the building." And that was not something that she had intended to ask them about. So that was a very positive thing. And I just want to show a slide of how this plays itself out on a project that we're working on right now, and that is another addition renovation project in addition to a Carnegie Library and another historic building on our campus that will bring all of our social studies and humanities together. So we're trying to celebrate the old building while building on new additions, and then the kind of image on the right is thinking about how do we bring together in interdisciplinary nodes faculty offices, student-faculty research space, classrooms, and other kinds of informal student spaces to bring them together to be a really exciting space and to provide the same kind of experience on a broader part of our campus. And one of the things that I reflect on in comparing the building at Clemson and ours is at Clemson, you started out with the intent that this was going to be a university building, that it was really going to serve cross-disciplines. In Grinnell, we started out with the idea and very much focused on this was a cross-science disciplines building, but what we found is that our students, no matter what courses they're taking and what their majors are spending lots of time in our science building because it's providing the kinds of spaces that really support their learning in their community.
We invite you to visit the LSC website for further stories from the field about the process of planning, of focusing on users in the context of focusing on the future for learning and learning spaces. Our website provides links to national reports that are major resources for planners at all stages of attending to Spaces That Matter, a portfolio of spaces that work, and collections of essays about audacious questions for planning that go beyond current practice. Information about upcoming activities related to learning spaces within the broader LSC community is also posted. The LSC is for and by the LSC community. Join us.